get out of here. Leave studio. Bye, guys.
Okay. Looks like we're live. Hi, Carrie. Can you hear me? Can Carrie hear me? Oh, no. We've lost Carrie.
Okay, we will get this figured out. I'm sure Gary is working on it in the background. Hi, Mama Bear. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but
Okay.
I think Carrie can't hear anything.
Okay. I'm sure Gary is going to jump on. But welcome everybody who is tuning in. For anybody who does not know, this is one of our favorite dream crushers, one of our favorite mamas from Hope Dealers. She is also the VP of Finance and the board treasurer.
Hi, Steph.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Glad everybody's here. So we're fixing some audio so that Carrie can join us. Yeah. So this is my first live, so.
You are going to do awesome. And yes, Gary's in the background trying to get this all worked out. Do you want to share a little bit about your experience, why we are on the topic of grief?
Sure. I've had a lot of experience with the issues of addiction, specifically opioids. My son has been in active addiction for many, many years. And on December 6th of 2016, I lost my daughter to an opioid overdose. I did not know she was using at the time. And I found out on December 3rd that she was using heroin. And I got up on December 7th to go to work, and she had passed away during the night. It took me not very long to know that my life was forever changed, that I would never be who I used to be, or maybe not even who I was becoming. Life was going to be different. And once the fog cleared a little bit, I knew I had to do something. Shannon was 23 years old. She was beautiful, but she didn't know it. She loved fiercely, especially her family and her friends. And that was part of what happened to her. Shannon would take on anyone else's demons and never dealt with her own. It's been 3.5 years almost, and life is still changing. I'm learning new things, I will say, and this is why I thought this was a good time to really start talking about grief and the different feelings that we have. And, the crying every single minute of every single day eventually does stop. But we often don't recognize that anger we're feeling is grief. That guilt we're feeling is grief. The isolation we feel is grief. And I do fear that the isolation we're all going through now during this pandemic is really exacerbating that with people. And maybe they don't even understand that it's their grief coming back. Do we have Carrie back?
I'm here. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank
All
you.
fixed.
All right. Well,
I think so for now.
Yes. I'm going to hop off and let you two beautiful mamas talk about this. And we are going to manage the comments in the background. And we love you, ladies.
Love you, Neff.
Well, thank you. Love you.
Glad to have you back, Carrie. I shared a little
All right.
bit.
Sorry, I don't know what I missed.
I just shared a little bit about my daughter, Shannon, how I ended up here. I mean, some of the things, that I kind of like, and I'm hoping we hear from other people, are people see grief as like this horrible sadness, which it is, but it's so much more. It's the anger, the guilt, the isolation, you know, and I don't know you all that well. So why don't you
No.
tell me your story and how Code Gratitude came about? Because I know how Code Gratitude came about, but it's a great story. So
Oh, thanks. Well, it's Code Gratitude coming about always seems like such a long entailed story, but it begins in August of 2017. My son Cody died from an overdose. He had been struggling with addiction for years prior to that, but he had been clean for almost 2 years. So our family thought that we were in a good place. We thought everything was good, so it was not something that we were prepared for at that moment. We just felt like everything was okay, which I'm sure that happens a lot.
yeah.
And I again, that was in August. Prior to that, I have my husband is a city firefighter who has been on job for 20 plus years, and I have two other daughters. Cody is the oldest, and then I have another daughter, Alexis, and then the youngest is Brenna. Brenna worked on the ambulance in the city, so between her job and my husband's job, they had a lot of personal battles dealing with seeing Cody struggling with addiction and then also going to work and having a lot of overdoses that they would go on their calls. So prior to Cody passing, my husband had just come home one day and he was just really super. Luckily, he's not on Facebook to hear me say that sometimes he's cranky a lot, but that was like a super cranky, frustrated, and I was like, "What's going on?" And he just said, "I just I feel frustrated with the job. I feel like it's hopeless. We're helping these people when they overdose and they get mad at us, and I see the same people back. I just saw this just frustration look that I wish, I tried to reassure him and I said, that's somebody, like, I'm sure that what you're doing is making a difference. You just probably don't see it. Um, but then it turned out a few days after that, Cody came home and he was talking about a girl that he had met and was saying that she had been in recovery, that she was really strong, in her recovery. And one of the weird things, he said it was kind of a weird coincidence that when she had overdosed a couple years prior to that, my husband's crew was the one that had actually been on that
Wow.
and had given her Narcan and saved her. And I said, oh, I said, well, I'll let you approach that with Dad when you're ready. So a few days after that, I came home and my husband, the tough guy, firefighter, was just a big emotional mess. He said, "You're not going to believe this. I'm working away in the garage, and Cody comes home with this young woman. Came in the garage, introduced herself, and just started, emotionally like thanking me, saying that she was so grateful for me, that she had a son, and had I not been there to save her, her son wouldn't have a mom." And it just,
Wow.
I saw the look. It,
Perfect
it gave him a
timing.
little bit of it was perfect, and it brought a little bit of that light back into his reason for doing his job, his passion. And I think it gave him confirmation, knowing he did make a difference. This young woman had a son, and as many do, and it's somebody, whether it's a daughter, son, brother, uncle, child. um Krista is her name, also had been working as a peer counselor, and so one of her give back in her recovery is also fighting this, for other people, and just seeing whatever she can do to help those in recovery, also to be able to show gratitude. So that happened prior to my son passing, and then a few months after that, he had overdosed. That first year of grief was difficult, as I'm sure you and anybody else who has lost a loved one know. expect it. It's one of those things where you go, month to month, day by day, second by second, whatever you can do.
Right. Yep.
I'm sure those are that first year everybody dreads the first birthday, the first every holiday. So
Yeah.
for our family, it was very hard. My husband had to make some choices whether he was going to be able to go back to work, how would he be able to handle going on his first overdose call after losing
Yeah.
our son.
Oh, that had to be hard.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't think that that was something he would be able to do or even want to do, but for him, that's his own way. I think that he keeps fighting this fight as well. But that first year, we went through all of our firsts, and it was difficult. It was ugly, as grief can be. I used to say to people, I'm gonna grieve gracefully. I'm gonna do it as gracefully as I can. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of friends and family that would say, "Oh my goodness, like, how are you still standing? How are you doing
Yeah.
this?" And
Oh, you're so strong. Yeah.
yes, and I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
really have that answer to give them, but it would be pretty much because I had to. For me, it was really important that I kept my family, held them together as much as I could. But and I'm not negating that those are moments you're allowed to to lose it and not be strong, and it's okay. But for me, that first year, I spent doing that, and then the anniversary was creeping up on me, and my husband and I had driven to Connecticut, and on our way home, I think I just started remembering things. And one thing that I just kept feeling like I missed something in this last year that I spent just concentrating on holding my family together. I just felt like there was something that I missed in this. I was supposed to have done something good with this, and I don't know what it was. At the time, my son was very private in his recovery. Um, he he wanted to get out the fire department. That he had taken a test. He had done really well. He just didn't want anything to affect that opportunity. So our family kept a lot of that quiet. Sometimes that's something I regret now. Seeing how I think it might have helped other people. But the one thing that I just kept remembering was the faces on all of the first responders, my husband's crew, the hundreds of firefighters, um, all the people from the ambulance, just that same look that my husband had when he came home that day and he felt hopeless, like he didn't make a difference. Cody was family to the fire department.
Sure.
So for them, it was personal. They lost somebody that they weren't able to save. And I saw that same look on their faces, and it broke my heart because I knew that they're still going on over themselves. I didn't want them to forget that these are people and that they have family and they need them to be passionate and to remember why they're doing this job. So it all just kind of started piecing together in my head. I was like, well, what helped my husband in that situation was Krista thanked him, and that gave him a
Right.
little bit of reassurance. So in that moment is when I just thought, why not encourage others to do the same thing? There are so many people that have overdosed multiple times, and for them to be able to have opportunity. And I know sometimes people think it's as easy as, well, okay, if you want to thank somebody, you can pick up the phone or make arrangements real quick. But sometimes it's all that work in between. So
Yeah.
we thought we would try to create an organization that would help not only inspire or encourage, but also be liaison and start making connections between all of the emergency medical service departments, the emergency rooms, even like the recovery therapist. It's expanded well beyond what I thought as far as like nurses, doctors. Obviously, the firefighters was where this whole idea was born. EMTs, paramedics. There's many people that have wanted to express gratitude for anybody who's helped them along in their recovery. So that's how Code Gratitude was born, and that's pretty much our mission, is to really inspire everybody else. And I think it's also beneficial. Krista is now finishing up her degree for being a therapist, but she has actively been a peer counselor at Unity, and she's wonderful. She is so incredible with her own personal story and her own inspiration. I think it's
Yep.
just
I
that
think it
opportunity to be
was
able to do that.
I think it was Krista that I met this past August at the SOARS overdose awareness event. And that was the first I'd heard of
Mhm.
Code Gratitude. And I thought just, how awesome. I mean, I think back, like I said, my son had been in active addiction for many years. And we did the roller coaster, the jail, the homelessness, the infections, the stealing, rinse and repeat. You know how that goes. Um, in just 3 months, we brought him home. He was living in Arizona at the time, and he was on the street, and he was strung out terribly. And so I had to have him located and bring him home. And I didn't want to tell him what had happened because I was so afraid of what he would do. And he had been asking to come back home for several months. And I had said, no, Jay, no, it doesn't matter where you live, hon. You're going to bring your disease with you. So when I called him that day and finally got a hold of him, I said, Mama's been thinking about it. And, maybe it is time for you to come home. And my son, knowing me, goes, Mom, what's wrong? And result was he came home and we got him into treatment. He was doing well. And then he relapsed. And 3 months after my daughter's death, I found my son overdosed on the bathroom floor. And yeah. And I broke my own cardinal rule. I didn't have Narcan in my house because he was doing really good. He was doing good. And it actually broke my heart when I realized that one of the Greece police officers that came through my door was the one that had been there in the attendance of my daughter's death. And the look on his face, like, they have to be professional and they have to do their job. But I could see it in his eyes. Like he couldn't even believe that he was, and I was living in a different place. I had moved. When my daughter died, I just bought a home. I hadn't closed on it yet. And I'd bought a home because the two of us had been living in a 1-bedroom apartment for far longer than 2 grown women should be living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So in the midst of all of this, I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment, so I'd moved to a new house. So the officer had no idea he was coming. And they saved my son's life. But what I saw in his eyes, the fatigue, the sorrow, we do forget that they grieve as well. They're in the front lines. What did you do? I mean, for me, my grief has taken like all different directions. It can be all over the map. I mean, like you said, that first year my daughter died just after Thanksgiving and just shortly before Christmas. And it was horrific. I don't know that I was even fully aware of what had happened yet. You're sort of just walking through mud, But then I found that I had all these other feelings. I wasn't crying all the time after several months, but I felt so angry. I was angry at her. I was angry at myself. I was angry at the people who knew. And I don't mean her peers. Kids have a code, and I get it. And a lot of her old friends, because my daughter had changed so much in recent months, a lot of her old friends had backed off. They didn't know what had happened or why. They didn't know why she had changed. But they were grown adults who knew and never said anything. So I was angry with them. And just the whole situation. I was so angry at the drug. And the year before my daughter died, I will bet my daughter had been to a dozen funerals for kids under 25. At least a dozen. Either due to the drug itself or drug related Um, and I was just so angry, but I knew I had to do something. I had to do something. Um, I've had to do a lot of soul searching. You know, that first year, did you experience those feelings yourself that first year? Or
Um,
was it more just the actual shock and grief?
so for myself, as Stephanie said, there are so many different the stages of grief are just they come in waves, and it's true. You think, okay, well, you should be. I get through this stage. I'm through like the acceptance, the anger, or whatever, so I should be okay. And it's not that way. As we discussed before, everybody said to me a lot, "Oh, you're so strong." Um, Part of that was I wasn't grieving. I picked myself up the initial day when I found out. Um, I was at work. I was at the salon working, and it was actually a fire crew. And some of the people that my daughter worked with that knew Cody and recognized that he was our family. So they showed up at my salon with some fire chiefs, which I thought was just odd, being that my husband was there. That was always one of those things as a firefighter's wife that you dread. You
Right.
imagine getting that knock at the door and saying
Sure.
something happened to your firefighter. So mine wasn't making sense of it. So um, after they had told me, that Cody had oversight, I had that initial, no, this isn't true. How could this be true? No, he's been clean. I played out a lot of those things like in the movies, the screaming, hit, fell to the ground, did all that. And that continued obviously for the first day or so. I can feel a lot of people say in those moments they can't remember, they blocked it
Yeah.
out. I can remember quite a bit. I actually So the next day I realized how broke my husband was and that he was not going to be able to support anybody, let alone himself. So I picked myself up and I thought I need to do right by Cody. I want everybody who loved him and cared about him to be able to have this, closure and what they needed in their grieving process. So I picked myself up and asked the piano, and I think that's what we do. A lot of us in those
Oh
grieving
yeah.
moments when you see that
Yep.
you need to do something, there are some that
You
that
just
aren't
do it.
able, and it's
Yeah.
okay to be not be okay in those moments. For me,
Yeah.
I I had to do it, but I was not when I look back now in hindsight, I kind of regret not taking the time to get the help, see a counselor. I had so many people that would recommend somebody to me, and I kept thinking in my head, I don't want to break the seal is the big joke. I'm being so strong. If I go and I talk to somebody now and tell them, pour my heart out to them, that I'm not going to be able to be as strong for everybody that I need to be. And
Yeah.
I do regret that.
Yep.
I
I did.
recently,
I did. I did see a therapist for a while, and it wasn't really the grief or the sadness. This is my second experience with child loss. I lost a
mm,
son in 2008 in a drowning accident. So I'd been
mm,
here and done this, but it was different. I had my husband,
mm,
and then I lost him 2 years after I lost my son. Um, a
mm,
year after my son's death, we'd barely begun to recover, and my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So he died 2 years after my son's death. Um, and yeah, it was, each one was a little different for me. Um, Shannon's death, in my absolute gut, I feel was preventable. My son died in an accident. My husband died of a terrible disease. My daughter died of a poison that she put in her body. And back then, like when my son entered active addiction, I didn't know anybody else whose child was a heroin addict. You know, I was ringing the bell on the opioid crisis years before it ever hit the news because I was living it with my son. But after Shannon died, I was sick of the silence. I went through, we talk about stages of grief, and we kind of, you read them in the books and they show you this nice, neat little chart, how first this happens, then that happens. What they don't tell you is the chart is like, oh, like this, because they don't happen in order, and you have to go back and revisit each piece over and over and over again. And I don't know that ever ends. I really don't know. It's been 3 years, and I have been in a situation where, like, I've been out with friends and a song comes on. Maybe it was a song my daughter used to sing, or it was a song that we jammed together in the car too. And I will just fall apart, and they'll look at me like, "What's wrong?" The same thing that's always been wrong. It doesn't go away. And you feel very isolated because, we've all lost maybe a parent or an aunt or an uncle. You grieve, but it's very different. It's a very different, not better, worse, bigger, smaller, just different. Obviously, I'm assuming Hope Dealers for me has been part of my healing. I honestly don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have taken all of this and channeled it into something. I knew that I could not stand by and watch another mother do what I was doing, watch another child throw their life away. So for me, getting into, and I'm assuming co-gratitude was the same thing for you, in that trying to get something positive out of the worst possible thing a parent can ever go through. So that is still one of my coping skills. And that's what I would say to anyone is, give back, find a way to give back, find a way to find people that know the type of grief you're experiencing, because it is different. It's a club none of us want to be in, but we are. For me, it was Hope Dealers. I have to be very, very careful to redirect negative thinking. I experienced a lot of guilt for a lot of different reasons in my daughter's death, and everything I know about substance use disorder and what happens in the brain, and it goes right out the window because I'm a mom, and my job was to protect her. And so I have to be very, very careful that when those feelings of, if only, what if I this, what if I hadn't done that, to redirect that into something positive. Some call it sucking down your feelings, but I know if I allow those feelings to fester, I'm going to fall into the abyss, and I don't know if I'll crawl out. That to me,
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go
no,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I totally that whole abyss part of it. Part of what I would advise, if there was somebody else that is going through this, whether it's you've lost your child or somebody else, the first thing you need to do is definitely find your support system, because even if you think you're being strong, you're going to find yourself in a moment. And if you are prone to use the moments to pick up a bottle of alcohol or do something else that would be more harmful to your own well-being, then that's where the support system comes in. I know I am so grateful for my family and my close friends that have stuck by me. And as everybody says, grief never leaves. It really doesn't. And I used to find comfort in just looking up some of the sayings and the quotes, because I those were obviously from somebody else who had experienced it that I hadn't known before what I
Right.
was approaching,
Yep.
that I was walking on. So I would find myself, when I had time alone. Those are the difficult times when
Oh
you're
yeah.
sitting there at home alone, and I would purposely over schedule myself. I took up more hours at both
Yep.
jobs. I kept using the excuse, well, it was to make up for my husband not being able to teach or something on the side. So I have to do this. But I know for me, that was my coping mechanism is as I kept busy. And that way I didn't have to have those quiet times where I would have to be sad about it. But when I
Yeah.
did have them, I am grateful, that I did have somebody I could pick up the call, the phone and call them and say, hey, you know what? It is very hard for me to admit that to anybody, that
Yeah.
I am struggling.
Me
If
too.
I was to pick up the call and say that, and I think that when you are grieving, when you have lost somebody, um, things are so different. Even friends that you had forever and ever since you've been young, it creates a whole different relationship. A lot of
Oh,
relationships don't make it,
I am
and then there's other
so
ones that you wouldn't expect.
glad you said that
Yeah.
because that's what I've gone through.
Hmm.
And this is not to fault anybody, but
No.
it it is true. I mean, people you've known forever, and you know what? People do what they can do, um, but
Hmm.
then you don't relate the same way anymore. Um,
No.
the, I
You
think
can show
they're
them
on.
grace.
Yeah, I love them dearly, and they they do what they can do, but it's
Mhm.
almost like there's this elephant in the room, and everybody's afraid to talk about it because that was just a really bad thing. um and I always say, speak their name. Yeah, I might
Mhm.
shed tears. I might shed tears,
Mhm.
but it's important that that topic not be avoided. Oh, we can't talk about that because um and it does become isolating because there are relationships that just are never the same after something like
Mhm.
this. Um, and you talk about how overscheduling. For me, it's and this pandemic has shown this to me. And I'm curious, not only for the people who are listening, but I know from my own standpoint, um, I can still work, but I only go into my office a couple of days, and then I work from home, and I live alone. And
Mhm.
it's shown me how much I relied on control and predictability, even 3.5 years into this. Um, because quite frankly, this shelter in has really kind of thrown me for a loop. Mentally, I'm definitely struggling to, keep
Mhm.
moving forward. Um, because I don't have to get up at a certain time, and I don't have to do this and this and this, and I don't have to do shopping on Wednesday because I'm off away from my office on Thursdays. Um, Nothing's predictable. We don't know when we're going to get back to normal. And that absolutely has brought some of those old feelings out again. Um, Now, did you said you work in a salon?
Yeah, so right now I'm shut down.
You are
So that
completely shut down.
I am, but I am grateful because you know, for me and everybody thinks, "Oh, well, she must just be home laying on her couch eating bonbons," or like she must be struggling. But for me, having my daughter is a nurse, and so I've kind of picked up the
Ah,
slack for helping out with my grandson who wasn't able to go to the sitters just because of worrying about whether or not our family is at risk because we have so many people working
sure.
in the front line that live here. So it has actually, I'm
So you've
grateful that
replaced it with something
I
else that
am.
you worry about.
I did. So it does. It keeps me, and that's one thing um I did start going to a grief share group recently. I was hesitant after I started talking to a therapist last spring, I think it was. She was wonderful, great. Then this a Right Heart, they had a group grief. And at first I was like, "Oh no, I don't need that." But I'll go and I'll help you out. I kept saying to my therapist as if I was, I had no reason to need to be there, but it actually turned out to be a godsend. It was wonderful. It's given me a lot of extra tools, and that's why I am such a big advocate now for being able to, even if it's your own peers, to sit with them and get something off because nobody else is going to understand except for somebody else that has
Right.
experienced it. like
Yeah.
you said, we have friends that they try really hard, and I have a great group of friends that haven't personally experienced that profound loss, but they are still, walking alongside with me. But being able to go and be in a group with other people that have that same heartache and pain and understanding is something so valuable when you are in these situations. So
Yeah, it
being able
is.
to sit on the computer and do like a Zoom meeting, just even to touch base and just it's funny. It's not funny, but just the discussion
Right,
came up of because we've lost somebody, and we know what loss feels like. How is the pandemic affecting you? Was a question. So there was a big group of people that to them it it wasn't too concerning because they'd already gone through what the worst was. So a lot of people kind of were a little bit more lax about it. They weren't too stressed, and then there's me who in the
right.
beginning I was like, no,
Yeah,
no, like this is cause for me it brought back because I knew what it is like to lose somebody.
right,
I
right.
didn't I had that fear of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose somebody else, especially because, as the numbers started
Oh,
creeping up, my
I,
husband, every time we would go to work, I would have a little moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty much like spraying them down with bleach and Lysol. And
right.
so I had those
So
moments for
you've
me, and
replaced, yeah, you
it was
replaced that
nice to
like
have a
one.
group.
Well, and I know, sadly, our club is getting larger by the day. Um, but I
Mhm.
would be lost without other moms who have
Mhm.
gone through this, and again, and this doesn't make any type of grief better or worse, but there is a difference when you lose a child to substance use disorder. If you came out and said, my child has cancer or my child has a brain tumor, the neighbors around your door, they're bringing casseroles, they're helping with your laundry, um when you say my child has the disease of substance use disorder, it's not that you don't get that same treatment. It's like everybody goes, ooh, there's still a stigma. And
Mhm.
that stigma follows even after the loss of a child. Stephanie brought up a good comment. She said the coronavirus reminds her of the daily struggle in the lives of family members and people struggling with substance use disorder. Um, that is so true. It is so true. We already hit sort of a self imposed isolation, even if it was only emotional isolation. Um, so I do think there's a danger of people who think they got to the other side and now they're at
Mhm.
home, they're caught in their own head. In my case, I don't have people to converse with. I live alone. So when it's a bad day or I'm struggling, it means that I'm sort of in my own head. And like you, I am not good at picking up a phone and saying, I'm struggling today. I'm not good at
Mhm.
it at all. Um,
Yeah. No.
and, we keep revisiting the tools we learn. For me, it was structure, which I don't have a whole lot of right now. Um, and the biggest thing I have to ward off is the guilt. You know, I should have known. I'd been living it for
Right.
years. I should have known, and I didn't. Um, and I didn't understand as much as I knew it was a disease and it was a brain disorder. I didn't understand how that brain worked. So after years of watching her brother struggle in active addiction, it honest to God didn't occur to me that she would touch heroin. I knew she was abusing substances.
Mhm.
Never in a million years. And now in hindsight, I go, well, why wouldn't she? You know,
Mhm.
she had a lot of trauma. And I struggle with why didn't I see that earlier? Although my daughter had not been using for a very long time, maybe about 6 months. Um, and I only knew for 4 days and she was gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was a Friday night. She had stolen my car keys once again after I had banned her from using my car. And when she walked out of the room, I went into her purse to get my car keys back and I pulled out dozens of dirty needles. And that's how I found out. And I was pissed. And there's the other guilt. I wasn't nice. I was angry. How could you be so stupid? Don't you know what this? And just a few days later, she was gone. And open access wasn't here. Hope dealers. I think at that point, I'm not sure. I didn't know enough at that point. It was only when I, started reaching out to some groups on Facebook that, she was doing the radio show and whatever. But that is one of the tools is, staying in touch with people who know what you're going through, who understand the disease of addiction. So many still don't understand it for the disease that it is. Well, you know what? I won't say so many won't understand it because at this point, I don't have patience with people who will stare all of the science in the face and say, well, I don't believe it's a disease. Opinion is the lowest form of intelligence. And I don't have time for those people anymore. I find I'm less likely to put up with it because you can't deny the science. You just can't.
Right.
Just like the science of grief, except it's not an exact science. I'm back at angry, but I think that's, again, part of the environment. I don't really have an outlet for all this stuff that goes on in my head, being at home so much. And normally I'm an accountant. So normally I am just living work right now. And I'm not. So, and I know that I use work, I use busy, to just stay out of my head. And to some point, I think, we need to do that because we can't live there. But sometimes I do, it's a coping mechanism. It's a defense mechanism.
Right.
Yeah, Patrick, that is a very good point. I mean, when I found out my daughter was using, none of these places existed. Open access didn't exist. Hope dealers didn't exist. So we didn't have any of those tools. So not only was I angry, I was paralyzed because I knew better than to just call up a detox center and say, hey, my daughter needs treatment, because I knew it wasn't out there. And that is a really good point. It was a waiting game, just we have so much more now, and yet it's still not enough. It's still not enough.
Right.
What is he? Oh yeah, Patrick's talking about how it absolutely is a brain disorder. And I have to remind myself of that. I don't know, I mean, you certainly understand the life of struggling in addiction and watching your kids go through it. But we do sometimes slip and we forget the science ourselves and have to, remind ourselves they didn't mean it. Their brain got hijacked. And I go back and forth. We're still learning, I think.
And it's normal. It's part of grief to be able to go back and do the what ifs. What if, we all do that. We played that game of, well, what if I had stopped him from walking out the door that day? What
Right.
if I, like answered the phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning? We all do that, and it's part of our grief. And I think for me, as you said, you involve yourself, with Hope Dealers, and I was not very, and I admit it now, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, I'm not very educated on addiction. My son had relapsed twice, and he, like I said, he kept it very private. For that reason, I involved myself as much as he would let me. But I do regret that now I am stepping outside of my comfort zone. Even going with Hope Dealers that one Sunday, to me, it was very eye opening. I tell so many people who have their blinders on about the stigma, thinking that it's not going to touch them, because I had so many people come to me afterwards and say, I had no idea, like your family was, like involved in sports, the perfect Sabrina family. So for that, I am grateful now. Unfortunately, it took what it did for me to be able to extend myself beyond in an uncomfortable situation where I would have never found myself walking down North Clinton, with somebody,
Right. A
um,
comment here
feeling like
from,
I'm going to help them. So,
yeah, I wanted to, address Barb. Um, I'm assuming your loved one has relapsed. Been there, done that. My son has relapsed dozens and dozens of times in the last 12 years. Um, he still lives in Arizona, and his latest relapse has landed him with a 5-year prison sentence in the state of Arizona that he started serving 2 weeks ago. Um, it, and you know it as a mom or a loved one, you want to save them, but it really is up to them. And that is one of the hardest things to wrap your head around, is that you can support them while they save themselves, but you can't save them.
and I'll be praying as well, Barb, for your child. But me, the one thing I'm grateful that I was able to do even through all those times is I always, I'm not perfect by any means, and I'm sure there were moments when I yelled and screamed, but the love part of it, even when it does get tough and they've relapsed so many times, to be able to continue to show them the love or the support is for me. I'm grateful that I was able to do
Yeah, and I am too. What I have found, I really didn't. My therapist, like I said, it wasn't the sadness really that drove me to therapy. There were a lot of other things going on with me. I was so unfocused. My memory was terrible. I just, if I couldn't remember things, I wasn't sleeping. Um, and as a result of being in therapy, I got the diagnosis of PTSD, um, which explained a lot. It explained a lot. And, but one of the things that the therapist asked me, and I was horrified that she would even say such a thing. But now, in hindsight, as I meet more and more parents, she said to me, because she didn't know my full, history with Shannon, and she said to me, "Was there a part of you that felt relief that the struggle was finally over?" And I thought, what? Like,
that.
relief? Are you kidding me? But now, in talking to other moms, I didn't, I didn't go through all of those daughter. So, but there are many moms that will say, yes, there was a relief, and then they feel guilty because they feel that way, but their child had suffered for so long that it was almost a relief that the pain and the suffering was over. Um, did you experience any of that at all?
I I've had people say the same thing to me. I I've had a lot of things that are hurtful said, and I know people don't mean it. For me, when people say that to me, it doesn't makes me mad because I'm like, I would give anything to spend every single minute of the rest of my life if it was a fight or a battle to help him, stay clean if I could still be with him, but I know for him, even in those 2 years that he was clean, it was a struggle daily. He would express it to us that, and we didn't understand, as far as those, that constant craving and all of those things to have to battle daily. So I understand from that point, but as a mom, those words, and I've had people say the same thing to me. I've had other people equate losing my child to somebody running away, one of their kids moving out, or I've had tons of
Yeah,
things, and I know people mean it,
yeah,
but it definitely, I fought, as hard as I could when he was struggling, and I think I would give anything to still be doing that than to be in this group of people that I don't have those options anymore. So I think for anybody that is struggling right now or knows that their children are using and they are in that position where they're trying everything they can, don't give up. I mean, I know
Right.
there's the you can't enable, you have to have your boundaries, but the other part is that they're still your children. They're,
Yep.
whether
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
fighting those demons.
And,
So
you
that's
can look back and, I know Gary was commenting that, he's not sure if anything that his family did would have made a difference, that he may very well have, done the same things. And we do tend to go back and say, I learned with my son, I started to learn the difference between support and enabling. And I had to finally set boundaries for him. No, you can't live at home. No, you can't use my car. No, you can't have any money. In hindsight, with my daughter, you wonder, well, was I too harsh? I was so angry that I couldn't even believe she had done what she had done. Like, why would you even think of picking up when you've seen the devastation? You've seen me crying days on end because my son was sick, or, ringing my phone at all hours, Mom, I need money. Mom, I need money. Mom. And he's on the street and you want to give it to him, but he's just going to stick it in his arm. So you can't give it to him. But we look back and go, well, was I too tough or too loving? Did I have the right balance? Did I not? And I guess maybe that it's different for everybody. I think everybody does it a little bit differently, but those are some of the things that they will come back to haunt you. And I think part of being a part of a group like Hope Dealers is you do get to see so many different sides. You see the parents that have lost their kids. You see the people who are still struggling in active use. And you see the people that are coming out the other side and living these lives, that I'm not going to kid you. Sometimes I'm envious because I want to say, why them and not my daughter? My son has terrible survivor's guilt. As soon as he heard, he was screaming, Mom, it should have been me. It should have been me. Why was it her? It should have been me. And those demons are still feeding his substance use disorder. There's absolutely no doubt. And until he is ready to deal with them, he will continue in active use. I know he will. But being a part of something bigger validates, because when I start with the what if only, shoulda, woulda, coulda, I have plenty of people who've been there, done that, who can say, Mama, you couldn't have changed it. And it helps. Not for long. You have to kind of revisit those things over and over. But it does help that I wasn't a perfect parent. We did the best we knew with what we had. I had 5 children. I was a stay-at-home mom. We did all, we never missed a game, a concert. My son was a senior in high school, and I was still going to parent-teacher conferences. I was one of 3 parents there, in a 400 class senior. And you need, as someone in grief, to connect with those people who know your grief and who can remind you of the things that you forget. And I think no, go.
I'm sorry. Karina, I absolutely love your point about when I did say enabling. It reminded me, I never considered myself as enabling, and in fact, I always thought it was BS. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The one time I went to a family thing, I actually got into a discussion with the therapist at the time. They were, saying enabling, and I said I was doing the best I could to help my child the best way that I knew, that I
Mhm.
could do it. So I 100%, after saying that, I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah,
So I
because I
appreciate
do. I
that.
think the word enabling does have a stigma. Again,
Mhm.
I think it puts it back on the parent that somehow it's your fault. Somehow
Guilt.
you have control over the situation. So I think that's a really good point. I think we should do away with that word. I think it's a bad word. It's a negative word, and it only feeds into the guilt we all feel anyway. I had someone was going on a rant on Facebook, and they actually said to me, well, I taught my child not to do drugs. And I lost it.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I lost it.
Yeah.
And I says, nope, not me. Took him down in the basement, showed him how to find a good vein. I'm like, do you really think? Now, there are those parents who clearly should not have been raising children. But most of us are doing the best we know how with what we've got.
Right.
And what worked for your Cody may not work for my Shannon or my Jason. And what worked for me and my family doesn't have to be what works for yours.
Absolutely.
And I think that it gets caught up in the stigma, which only feeds the grief. It only makes it worse because we're given the impression that somehow we should have just stopped all of this. We should have made it stop.
Right. Yeah.
So I do.
Yeah.
That's new, Karina. We're that's going to be on our list of to-dos, is to do away with the word enabling. Because I agree that actually hit me. That was a huge impact to me, what she just said. Because there's very negative connotations to that. Very negative.
It made me very defensive. I was very defensive when I was in that group, and I thought, what do you mean? How could I be wrong? And I remember even Cody saying to me, Mom, just don't say anything. And I don't like confrontation. I usually don't
Right,
even
I don't
like
either.
push any envelope, but I did. I felt very defensive because at the time I was doing the best I could, and I was doing everything I could possibly do, to save him. So
Yeah. And I think, words, something I used to say to my daughter all the time. She would always, I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm ugly. And she wasn't. She was beautiful, absolutely beautiful girl. Yes, she was overweight, but she was absolutely beautiful, an incredible singer, had all this going for her. And I used to say to her all the time, words have power. And the most powerful words are the ones we say to ourselves. And if people could just start, and I've had to learn that too. So I try to remind myself of what I was always telling my daughter when I get into that, negative tape playing in my head. The most powerful words are the ones we say to ourselves.
That's true.
You can speak it into being. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And just finding, for anyone out there, don't be ashamed. Don't buy into the stigma. Find like-minded people. Find people who know what it's like to live with someone struggling with substance use disorder. Find people, who, yes, they may have lost children, but they lost them in a different way, and therefore their experience is different. Like I said, if I had lost my child to leukemia, everybody would be running around and doing. And when you lose your child to an opioid overdose, nobody knows what to do, and they just sort of back away. Connect with someone who knows what you're feeling. My mom friends, as sad as we can be, are some of my best support, because I know that there's nothing that I'm feeling or experiencing that they haven't or won't.
Right. For me, also part of my healing and my grieving is being able to find even the little things to be grateful for. I know that gratitude is kind of my thing, but I can attest and I can preach it that for me, that is what what gets me back up going, standing every day, is to remember that, yeah, it sucks and it freaking hurts. And some days I just don't even know, like, this is really going to be a bad day. I can prepare myself, but if I stop myself and just remember or remind myself of the little things that I have, it doesn't take away from my loss, but
Right.
it does remind me that I do still have a purpose. And I know that when you are grieving such a loss, that it is a hard thing. It's some days there you can't find anything to be grateful for.
Nope.
Even if it is the air you're breathing or anything simple, but just even keep on, practicing that. I know I've talked to other mothers who have lost their children, and it's the same thing for them. They've had to learn that process, and I just, for me, that is one of my keys.
Yeah. Yep. I entered 2020 not with resolutions because I don't really believe in them, but wanting to be healthier, wanting to be mentally healthier, physically healthier. Finding out who, every time we've had a loss, and like I said, I've had 3 big ones in the last 10 years, you have to redefine yourself because you're not the person you used to be. And that place of trying to figure out who am I now, or when someone says, how many kids do you have? And it sticks because if I only say 3, I've left out my 2. But if I say 5, then I have to tell my story. And so I'm going to do these things, I'm going to watch what I eat. I'm going to take my vitamins. I'm going to read motivational things and try to be grateful. And then the damn pandemic hit. And you can't find your healthy food and you're stuck into home inside your head. I do believe, that being grateful, like my other kids are just such a blessing. My grandkids bring me so much joy. And when people ask me, especially those who maybe are only a year in, they're like, how do you just get up every day? Because my kids need me to. They have experienced loss, and we forget that. A different kind of loss, but they've lost their sibling. And that's a huge, that's a huge thing. And that can get lost. I can remember sitting down. I lost my dad when I was young. I was just married. My son was just a little over a year old. My dad was only 51 when he died. And my mom was 41 when she was widowed. And I can remember being so worried about my mom. We got to take care of mom. We got to, make sure she's okay. That I didn't grieve the loss of my dad for years. And I sat my kids down many times and said, I love you. I love that you're trying to take care of me, but I don't want that to replace your grieving your sibling. They bring me so much joy. And that's why I do it. Because they don't need another loss any more than I do. And sometimes that's all you got. That's all you got. You find that one thing that says, I'm going to get up today because people are counting on me too. So, let's see. Oh, we love you, Karina. Love you guys. And we love Hope Dealers. And that's another thing. Hope Dealers, we're very often known as, the people who clean up needles or give out lunches. But it's support. It's about support. You're a parent who's struggling. You're a sibling who's struggling. You need someone to talk to and you don't know where to go. You can always call our Hope line at 1-800-633-8690. That's not just for people needing treatment. It's for anything, just someone to talk to. Or if you want to talk to a mom who's been there, call our Hope line and leave a message for me and I'll call you back. We do what gets us through the day. So it was great being on here. I'm very happy to have met you, Carrie, even though it's not face to face. Lord knows when that'll ever happen.
Yeah, someday. But thank you. I appreciate Hope Dealers too for everything that you guys do.
Yep.
And
I know Code Gratitude has been out with us before, and I think that's amazing. And you know what? I think that's part of healing too, not just for those who've lost people, but for those in recovery. It's important to say thank you. It's important to be reminded that if it weren't for that first responder, you wouldn't be here today. So you're doing great work over there too.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.